September 27th, 2023. It is 6:00 p.m. We'll be calling the Provo City Planning Commission meeting to order. We'll start with a roll call and the commissioners will state their names and if they have any conflicts. We'll start with Commissioner Knudsen.
Robert Knudsen, no conflicts.
Raleen Walleen, no conflicts.
Lisa Jensen, no conflicts.
Jeff Whitlock, no conflicts.
Daniel Gonzalez, no conflicts.
Jonathan Hill, no conflicts.
Melissa Kendall, no conflicts.
Andrew South, no conflicts.
Barbara DeSoto, no conflicts.
All right, let's start with a Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Jensen will begin that for us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Although this is a public hearing, only the presenters and those invited by the commission will speak or ask questions, unless otherwise invited by myself, the chair. So please wait to speak until called upon by the chair. When speaking, please be sure to speak into the microphone. This is a recorded hearing. It's broadcast on YouTube. So speak in the microphone so that the record is clear. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also, please limit side conversations as they interfere with the audio recording. If you need to have a side conversation, please step out of chambers. Please do not attempt to interrupt or speak over people. Intimidating or threatening speech or behavior will not be tolerated at any time. Please refrain from clapping or cheering during the hearing. I say this, as chair, I have a very high vested interest in allowing everybody an opportunity to speak. I will get to you. You will have time to speak. You'll be on equal footing with any other public member presenting with the same amount of time. If side conversations do need to happen, like I said, feel free to step outside. We also have a planning staff available that could address concerns that may come up in the meantime. As far as agenda items go, we have order. We'll begin with item number 1. Development Services requests ordinance text amendments to chapter 15.20.060 design standards. This is a citywide application. Staff member Hannah Sauls will be presenting.
Thank you. Is there a way to move the slides forward? The computer's not on. I don't have it. This is a fairly straightforward adjustment in the same vein as the last round of water-wise landscape updates I brought to you a few months ago. When we took that to the council, as the other departments were doing their review of the proposed amendment, Public Works had some concerns about our existing policies about artificial turf that were adopted several years ago. So we were asked to come back and revisit those in a second round. You can think of this as like a part 2, finishing that up. There we go. The amendments are fairly straightforward. We are simply prohibiting artificial turf, except in athletic fields and public recreation spaces where real turf grass wouldn't make sense. The only addition you see down there at the bottom in blue is continuing point 3 from the struck list, or point 4, sorry, that outdoor carpet shall not be used in landscaping. We don't want green carpet in place of a lawn. The entire point is stormwater permeability, reducing these urban heat islands that create hazardous environments for trees and wildlife. We want to make sure that this is as spongy and absorbent and as temperature moderated as we can get as a city. And unfortunately, artificial turf has not been found to help us get there. It has ecologically roughly the same effect as simply paving over your lawn with loose gravel or stones, which we also do not permit. Do you have any questions or concerns?
Yeah, I had one. In the overview part of the staff report,
Yes.
there's the last paragraph of the overview section. There's mention of a reasonable accommodation process.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, is that process, is it codified? Is it in the ordinances?
It's an administrative process. Yes, it's something that the legal team already has in place. It's a well-oiled machine. Our zoning enforcement staff are already trained to have this discussion with the resident if they feel like that resident would qualify for an exemption.
Go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it is okay to cover a yard with rocks, is it not? I mean, if you have other plants and shrubs in there?
We do require that minimum 40% vegetative coverage, but yes, otherwise you could.
So why can't the artificial turf fall under the same category as the rocks and be in that 60%?
This is one of those where it is a ground cover solution that a long time ago was pitched as being more water wise. And it's simply not because of these other harmful effects. And you're right that we do allow other alternatives that might be addressed in a future code update. But what we've been asked to address in this round specifically is the artificial turf. If addressing rock coverage is something that the Planning Commission would like to talk about, I could bring that back at a later item.
No, I'm not trying to say we shouldn't have rock coverage. I'm just not convinced that artificial turf isn't a better alternative than a weed covered lawn or anything else. Like I've seen it done poorly and I've seen it done well. And like every time I go to Sam's Club, for example, I think it looks a million times better. And their trees are probably not going to die anymore with the artificial turf than they did with people running over the grass. So I see it I still see it as a good alternative, and I'm not convinced that it needs to be X'd. So that's why I was hoping you would give me how it's different from rocks, because it feels the same to me.
That's how it was originally perceived when it was codified to allow this back in 2019. In the intervening years, what our urban forestry team and what our stormwater team has seen is that even rocks, the layers get bunched up, water pools, it doesn't go through. People do still also try to play and release pets, children to use this as an outdoor space. But you will even find from manufacturers, they will say that you have to hose the grass off because it's so hot sitting in the sun. Picture like a plastic tarp in our 100-degree summer days. So there are some differences from the rocks. You don't have those problems with rocks.
Rocks are still hot.
They are, but no one's sending their toddler or dog out to play on rocks. And people don't install or ask you to hose down your rocks before you use them in your yard for the day.
Any other questions for the planning staff, commissioners? Commissioner Kendall?
And that's true for newer type turfs also. Like I'm sure there are newer products that might be better, more permeable and have better outcomes. Is that not true, or?
It depends on the price point. And from what our staff in the field has seen, they tend not to be installed very well, these artificial lawns. I understand that it's a very complicated, there's a lot of nuance when we're talking about these gray spaces of water use and heat islands. I understand that there are trade-offs with this. Thank you for acknowledging that.
Oh, wow. I have a question just around a basic question around the applicability of this. So obviously this is part of Title 15 of the code, the land use development. Is this specifically applicable to net new developments, or is it developed to everyone? Like if I wanted to go put like a little bit of turf in my backyard, would that be prohibited by this?
Existing landscapes are grounded or are grandfathered in. If you had put in your artificial turf last year, it would be all right. But this would apply going forward to all landscapes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, with that, we're gonna appreciate your presentation. Is there any district representatives from any of the 5 districts present that would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna turn this over and open the public hearing portion of comments. We have a long agenda tonight, so please come forward. If I see a gap with nobody coming forward, we're gonna keep on moving. So take a seat. If there's multiple people, take a seat on the front row so we know that there's pending comments. Go ahead and state your name and residence.
Stan Jensen. I live in Provo in District 1. It just sounds like this is an overly broad prohibition. If there are concerns when it's not installed right or when it's a certain type of product, it would seem that we would allow people with proper installation and the right types of products to use this product. I have a few neighbors who have this. I don't see a problem with it. I'm not an expert. I have no special background, but I would prefer that our prohibitions be limited to cases where it's really causing a problem. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Jensen. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else lining up for comment, so we'll go ahead and close the public comment portion of the hearing, and then we'll discuss it amongst ourselves, commissioners. Go ahead, Jeff. Commissioner Whitlock.
Yeah, I understand what is trying to be accomplished here, and I think for sort of like large new developments or commercial developments, I can understand, but I think I kind of agree that it's overly broad prohibition. I think I've seen many tasteful and very nice applications of turf in private property in people's backyards, and I just feel like it's overreach.
I agree. If I were to find a happy medium between this, I would just suggest that it just have that limit of it's in the other 60%. So you have to have 20% planted green landscape, but I think artificial turf should be categorized and allowed under 6B in section 15.20.060 in the design standards. I think it should still be allowed to be there. I feel like it is permeable, maybe not as permeable, but it has permeability. It's certainly not as hot as black asphalt or rocks, and I think it looks better than a neglected yard, so I would like to see it remain in the code as an option. And if somebody wants to enforce on one that is done poorly or looks bad, then that can be something they do. You can add language for how it has to be maintained or installed according to standards, but I think restricting it is a mistake.
And I just want to jump in and add that we just purchased our family home, and my father has put turf in the entire front yard. So my home has artificial turf and doesn't pose a problem of heat or anything like that. The worst thing for us is bushes sometimes get little prickly things in it, and you can't get rid of those, but unless you blow them. But I guess it was grandfathered in because I'd be in violation, I guess. So it's great.
I would agree. Exactly what you said, Lisa. You said that very well. I think it should be in the same category as rocks. And there are applications where this could be beneficial and keep people from having very unsightly things, and especially in small places. So for example, there might be park strips or certain places where it's hard to get water to. And in that case, you could have it look nice and not have to get water there. So we have a side of our house where nothing can grow. There's too much shade between us and the house next to us. And I have rocks there now, but I would love to have turf because then it would look nicer than the rocks.
So I have a different opinion here. One of the things I love about this item is that it was introduced 2019. We've had some time with it, and it's determined that it hasn't done what it was purported to do in terms of being friendly as reducing the amount of water needed, etc. So I appreciate the fact that we have had a positive look at it, and it's not doing what we thought it was. And so we have staff coming back saying that, hey, we should revisit this. in preparation for it, I also looked at the science a little bit and have not been convinced that this is really great for us. Like, we've talked about aesthetics, so I think there is probably an argument there for aesthetics, but in terms of what it does for our natural environment, it's actually harmful. So for me, I think that's enough of a negative to say, let's not do it unless we have a reason to do it, so.
I agree with that. We have a lot of waterways and a lot of, we have a lake right there, and there's a lot of, we often don't know what the effect long-term will be on those things, but we do know microplastics are really bad for our native species and things which are already under the threat from other human intervention. So for what it's worth.
I hear that point. I think it's a good point. What I would say though, and this is what happens a lot, is like you codify something so strongly and then technology changes quite fast. And I know that this is an issue that the companies are aware of. And so, I Google non-toxic turf, and there's a lot of new technologies and things that are coming out that like address these problems. And so I think the market tends to adapt pretty fast. And so I don't know. I think it's a problem for sure. To me, the worst offenders would be the people who are grandfathering in, not the people who are, buying the newest and latest turf that are addressing these concerns. So would be another variable to consider.
Go ahead.
I would think that the ones that are still allowed to, those are, if we're saying we're only going to allow sport fields, but not a 10 by 10 patch in somebody's yard, is that really going to make a measurable difference compared to the ones that are still allowed? And I feel like if you limit it and you put restrictions on how it's to be done, then you've already put some control over doing it well, doing it with the best practices, doing it in a way that will limit the impact that science says it has. Because of course we don't want to make things worse, but I like Jeff's point, Mr. Whitlock's point, that there's however many are already there are going to be the worst offenders because the technology hasn't caught up.
I'm curious with the breakdown, like what other alternatives we might be able to propose, because under 6A, I just don't think artificial turf grass belongs in the same category. It's just, to me, it just doesn't.
I agree, it shouldn't be in 6A.
But as for B and D and the other ones, I'm open to movement.
Right. I feel like it can be slashed out where it's slashed out on 6B, but then added to the list of what could be there in the non-vegetated areas. Like we're categorizing it as bark or a ground cover, right? We're not categorizing it as the planted area. And that's where I think the change should be made. It's not in the same category as grass or shrubs. It's in the same category as bark or rocks. And so it should fall under those restrictions in my mind. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. And what percentage is that then with the?
I think it would be 60% because you have to have in A, it says living vegetation shall cover a minimum of 40%. So then the remaining unbuilt area would be 60% that could be in ground cover or of any variety in my mind.
What if it was even more restricted? What if it was, say, couldn't be more than 40%, something like that, to try to address the issues with heat islands, et cetera, and permeability, those kinds of things, just restrict even further how much land you can cover with it? Would that address some of the concerns that are had?
You're saying like a separate requirement just for the turf? Because I feel like if you say 40% for any of those, that's 60% that has to be planted. That's a greater burden.
Right. No, for the turf specifically.
So turf has its own special restriction that you can't have more than X number.
X%.
That would make sense to me because I think this belongs in limited applications, places where it's hard to get water, and it's a better solution than rocks where the weeds come through so quickly and it just gets unsightly very fast.
Like I'm glad you brought up, like I can see where you'd want it in a shade place where it's otherwise ungrowable. That makes sense to me.
Or a park strip where it's very difficult to get water to it.
Yeah. I do kind of lean, personally, I kind of lean more towards Commissioner Hill's thought of maybe.
Yeah, I think maybe
Up there.
a middle road here is to say some sort of limitation on the extent of it, right? If our concerns are, effects on the environment, heat islands, those kinds of things, permeability, then restricting the extent of the land more stringently than we do grass, for example, helps several of those. And then requiring certain installation standards, as well as perhaps types that don't release microplastics can address the others, right? And so we're not doing a blanket ban in that case, but we are making sure that these relevant concerns are being addressed.
Yeah, sorry, my mic is really loud. It seems that like the ones that are made of like the shredded tires that have polypropylene and nylon are like the worst. You could just outlaw that class, and there's new ones that basically are plant-based that are made up of different types of plant materials. There's also ones that you use like sand and pea gravel. Like there's other alternatives I think very much address the environmental concerns, because that's my biggest, I agree with that point of like basically the microplastics getting into the water table or running off and getting into our lakes and stuff. So that feels like there's a lot of negative externalities. So it's no longer purely just a private property issue. But I feel like you can address that with this ordinance without just categorically banning the thing.
Interestingly, I think that those things you just described are listed in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the subsection of D. It says artificial turf grass used for landscaping may not include rubber infill in a yard adjacent to a public, like it talks about the rubber infill. So like it does already point to those differences.
Anyone else?
I guess I'm curious if that was already included in the struck out part, which I didn't read. If staff has a comment on whether that didn't work or what was the issue.
Yeah, can we recall Hannah? Speaking to his question, and then also, were there instances where we found that there was just this mass watering that just wasn't accomplishing the effect of xeriscaping? Because it was like moved into thinking, oh, let's accomplish xeriscape, but then when you find it's being watered, I'm curious about that in addition to what he brought up.
I'm not sure about the exact water numbers. I would have to ask our water teams. I don't think they've tracked the exact properties where it's happened, but it is good that you brought up the installation standards, because that was addressed when this was put in place in 2018, as was pointed out. But the majority of cases that our crews seen out in the field have not been installed properly. Most people don't check these, don't always check these landscape codes as they're retrofitting their homes. We don't require a building permit. We have no way as staff to verify that it's being installed correctly. And if our zoning enforcement teams are driving past an artificial turf park strip, they're not trained to be able to recognize whether it's done well. We've found that enforcing those installation standards was nearly impossible. And I should note that this recommendation came from Development Services, of course, our zoning enforcement, but also Public Works, Power, and the Parks Department all unanimously recommended just getting rid of turf. When we asked what middle grounds we could reach, what they recommended, they all said, just get rid of it.
I have a question. Was there any quantifying of damage to drain pipes or anything like that? Or is it just what did they describe, Public Works in particular, about what were problems with that? I guess, what did those areas of the city talk about that were concerns?
Public Works had said that they had not seen it have the desired effect on water use reduction. I don't know what those numbers look like, but reporting from them. The stormwater teams were also particularly concerned about microplastics, which came up as well, which you don't get from the rocks. That was Public Works' main concern. From Parks, it was these heat islands, especially as we're seeing them in park strips or grass strips where people are trying to take their dogs or their pets. It's not a safe environment, always for the people that Parks most tries to represent. Our energy department was particularly concerned about the damage to trees because energy, of course, houses our urban forestry team. They are also concerned about the water permeability and runoff, as was Public Works. Those were the main concerns.
So someone would be installing, turf, or maybe they put trees to meet some landscape requirement, but they install turf and it kills the trees, thus defeating
That
whole
had
thing,
been
right?
seen very commonly, especially in park strips by our urban forestry team. A lot of the trees that they were calling out to have replaced were in xeriscaped yards where people had simply stopped watering the area as much as the trees needed, or in these artificial park strips where it was creating this radiated heat back up at the underside of the leaves that's not designed to be able to take that heat. That evapotranspirative loss is just expedited when you put heat sources underneath the tree.
Go ahead.
What if we, in the interest of time tonight, say we would like to see this be presented in a way that treats turf as a non-living landscaping instead of grass? Like, I think we're all agreed that it's not in the same category as grass and shrubs, and something that addresses the things we've talked about, and maybe continue it for something that meets the concerns we've discussed, so that we don't have to sit here solving ecological problems right now.
Yeah. So like it's something not quite 100% ban, but just a least restrictive.
Because I think we all agree that we don't want the negative effects that everyone's finding, but we also agree that its enforceability citywide and its measurable effects citywide is probably not enough to have it be banned. I don't know. Jonathan has something.
I just have a quick question. When you say park strips, what do you mean by that?
I mean, that's technically they're 7 foot now, the 7 foot strip of grass between the curb and the sidewalk.
On the sidewalk?
Yeah.
Which is technically, it's owned by the homeowner, correct?
It is owned by the homeowner,
Yeah.
but the trees are city property, oddly.
Yeah, because that's confusing. Yeah. Because I think, just to go back to my earlier comment, like, I think it makes a lot of sense for like these kind of pseudo public spaces, for public parks, for brand new large developments, for commercial developments, all makes sense. Where I just feel like it's overstepping city authorities, like in my backyard, if I want to put a turf, like little circle surrounded by trees and shrubs, like, I just feel like that's the argument where I just, like, with private property, I just don't feel like the cons overweigh the private property right concerns.
Following up on that, I would love to see come back some of those specific examples you were talking about where trees were dead or something like that, to really see the effects of this. And I'm curious, why make an exception for athletic fields? If we're concerned about heat islands and water usage, et cetera, it seems like a 10 by 10 spot in someone's backyard with bushes is way less of an effect than a 100-yard football field.
Also, increasing amount of evidence suggests that they're very bad for athletes. They're much more likely to cause knee injuries and other stuff like that. So, I mean,
so I'd like that issue revisited as well.
Okay, I'm sensing there's some movement towards continuing this item for further study. If we're doing that, I want to. Do we feel that we've given staff members all enough items to revisit concrete? I want to make sure we do that.
I'm so sorry. One more thing. Also, rooftop decks in the development that I lived in. That's a very commonly put on rooftop decks. It's a very nice amenity rooftop deck. So just something to be aware of. I'm not sure where that would fall and how we've written this.
Yeah, and just as a side note, I've seen them at like restaurants and little outdoor dining areas.
Make sure you allow for how you want that to go as well.
Yeah. Anyone else want to give some specific items for the task staff with?
So what I think we liked was not treating it like it's a plant. Maybe applying some sort of percentage requirement to it and treating it like it's a ground cover. And then maybe having some sort of standards written in there, whether they're easy to enforce or not, just so that if there was a problem, you could say it wasn't built to the right standard. Is that?
Yeah, that's fine. I would also add in a provision for shaded areas where things have been ungrowable. Commissioner South.
So following up on Commissioner Hill's question about examples of where this has been damaging. Like we can say, what about these conditions? I think we should have that looked at. But if all of our staff services are categorically saying we don't want it, it might be nice to have that come back again, because I'm not sure even in these, micro situations or how that might go well, I'm not sure that that's really something that we ought to entertain completely if our entire services staff is saying we don't want it. So maybe some more information or evidence on why why they're saying that we don't want this. Like there may be more there to it. So.
Right, because if they have numbers that show the microplastics, and if they even could tell us, if they're all coming from an old high school field that got redone and it's over and done with, then maybe those numbers don't matter. But I don't know how they find where the source is of those contaminants, but that would be helpful.
I want to say this is like as a role as a public citizen, I give quite a bit of deference to development services and city staff. You all are the experts in areas that I don't have expertise in. As chairman of the planning commission, I give deference to the concerns of my co-commissioners. And so I hope you kind of understand. I'm trying to balance things where I recognize what's unanimity among staff citywide, and then trying to address the concerns of commissioner members.
Absolutely. And part of our staff's job is to balance these concerns from these appointed officials representing the public and staff's expert knowledge. So we're just threading the needle on that, and I'll bring back some more information or some other alternatives.
Okay, is there a motion to continue?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Well, do you want me to state it?
Yeah, go ahead.
I make a motion that we continue item number 1, Development Services request ordinance text amendments to chapter 15.20.060 Design Standards, citywide application. With the, I don't know if we need to state a date for whenever Development Services is ready to come back with some of the things that we asked for.
I'll be herding cats with 4 different departments. It might be better to give me a bit more of an open calendar.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm not setting a date. I'm saying whenever it works out.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, let's vote on that. Start with Commissioner Knudsen.
Aye.
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 I'll vote aye. Motion to continue passes unanimously. The votes 9-0. Item number 2. Jake Black requests project plan approval for a new industrial warehouse in the PIC Planned Industrial Commercial Zone located at 2725 South Mountain Vista Parkway, Spring Creek neighborhood. Nancy Robinson presenting.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, so with this study or this proposed plan, so it's currently zoned as planned industrial commercial. The lot is 0.92 acres. And the building is approximately 17,000 square feet in space, which covers about 42% of the lot. The required amount of parking for this use is 1 space per 600 square feet of gross floor area, which would require 29 spaces for the proposed project. But the applicant provided a parking demand study and would like to request a reduction of the 9 stalls. In the report, I had put that there was no issues that had been raised by the neighborhood. There was just one comment that was raised at a neighborhood meeting. The question was asked whether or not this was a clean operation, and the applicant responded that yes, it can be dirty, but this operation will be clean. Everything will be contained inside
There won't be any particulates released. They will all be caught in dust collectors inside the building. There shouldn't be a lot of noise. There are only 5 to 6 customers a day. They'll pull in the building and they'll unload their truck. There won't be a lot of traffic. So let's see. This is the proposed layout with the 9 stalls. There's only one adjacent property that has been developed and all the other surrounding properties are vacant. The proposed use is consistent with the surrounding uses. The only thing, let's see, the parking study indicates that the developer's unique use for the warehouse will only require parking for 3 employees, and the intended clients drive through the warehouse, drop off their work, and leave the premises. So 9 spaces would be more than sufficient is what the parking study says. Staff is comfortable with this requested parking reduction because of actual work history and demonstrated parking demand for this specific business. Additionally, there are not any nearby residential uses that overflow. Parking could impact. There are several undeveloped properties in the area, and because of the location being a block east of the rail line, they don't anticipate that that will change. So this is a rendering of the elevations and the proposed landscape plan. This is an actual photo of the site. Do you have any questions for me?
Hi, I have a question. Oh, just to know, I should have said this on the previous item. Our applicants have 15 minutes for their presentation. I'm going to do it right now. When our applicants have 15 minutes for their presentation, when the time's up, you'll hear a ding and the microphone is muted. Following your presentation, if we have questions, we'll invite you to come forward at the time. Yeah, I just want to know, staff member Saltz was under 15 minutes, and same with staff member Robinson. Robinson. All right. Oh, that's true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, my question was, do we have, what's their current address or current location? Can we, I want to see what their old operation was like and what kind of parking and
I don't know what his current address is. That might be something.
That's fine. I'll ask them when they come up to give that.
Yeah, they're not in Provo, so I think they're in Springville, but he can tell you.
Okay. Anyone else have questions for staff? Go ahead.
Just one question. This is for a specific use. What's staff's, I mean, based on your recommendation, are there any thoughts about change of use down the road? And I mean, if this property got sold or whatever, and now we have 9 stalls and we have very limited space to just have additional parking, so want to convert this into something else. I mean, this is a steel building, pretty easy to convert that into other use cases. Was that considered? I mean, is that an issue we need to be looking at?
It was considered, but because of its location and not really adjacent to residential, there wasn't a concern for overflow parking to, encroach on that. So we did consider that.
I just wanted to follow up on that. So what you're saying is it does carry forward. So if the property is sold and there's a different use, the parking carries with it.
Yes.
Maybe a clarifying way to answer that question is, I think we're supportive of this request. Considering the history of this site, the fact that this was, when an environmental cleanup site, this is a huge step forward. It's putting the land back to productive use that hasn't been that way for decades and creates value that hasn't existed. So that's a positive thing. This specific request is a little bit unique, and it does limit the future opportunity for this site. So at some point, if this is granted and the owner decided, or some subsequent owner needed to sell the property, it could limit the type of use that could go into this facility in the future. But I think we recognize that, and we think that that's a worthwhile risk because it puts this property to use. I think Mr. Jarvis has made a good attempt to try to do something good and to bring some value into our community. So
Okay, two things. One, just state your name and
I'm sorry,
position.
Keith Morey. I'm the Economic Development Director.
Okay, and then two, that would come into play with a change of use. Would come into play at a business license application. Correct?
Exactly. Yeah, it may be that we couldn't approve the business license, so the sale actually couldn't go through, or might be conditional on their being able to get a business license. And once they found out that they couldn't, they wouldn't be able to go through, or decided not to go through with the purchase of the property.
Does the business license issuing actually have the ability to say, to determine how much parking is required when something's been given an exception? You know, like the numbers in the code say you're supposed to have X numbers of parking. And if we approve something with a reduced parking requirement and somebody else comes in, how do they say, oh, we only need 4, so we're fine? Like, how do they determine that? What formula does a business license office use to do those exceptions?
The parking requirements, the exemption you're going to require, potentially grant, is for this business in this scenario, right?
It's not building specific?
It's at this location for the project that is being submitted to you. At some point in the future, if that were to change, part of their due diligence would be that they're going to put a new business in there, and that new business is going to require more parking that this site doesn't have. And so potentially we wouldn't grant the business license and the sale might not go through.
You wouldn't just say, oh, we can park on the street and let it go because it's in a neighborhood and we don't care? Like, at what point does somebody say, like, if they're not changing the footprint of the building and they don't need to go through this process of getting approval for anything, and they're just basically putting a new sign on the building, how do you regulate those things?
All business licenses are circulated to several city departments. It's circulated to a planner who has to sign off on it. We check to see if that business has sufficient parking. We look at the parking demand for that business, and if there's not enough on-site parking, we deny the business license.
Thank you. I think that's what all of us were trying to ask. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. Did you have something else you wanted to add? Okay. Thank you, Staff Member Robinson. With that, we'll move on to this is a Spring Creek neighborhood. Are there any district representatives? I'm sorry. I just really want to get through tonight's agenda. Will the applicant please come forward? As I mentioned before, you'll have 15 minutes for your presentation. Go ahead.
Yeah, Jeff Jarvis. I live in Payson, 330 West Utah Avenue. I own this company, Tough Coat. We've been in business since 1995. So yes, we did purchase this property. It was an eyesore. It was ugly, horrible, and we've done a lot of work, and we're trying to make it something really nice. The problem is the lot is not square. It's small. It's hard to fit everything in there, and we've twisted and turned and tried to, you know, we had it at one point, and then the entrances wouldn't work because they were too close to the corner and so forth. So now we've had to move it again, which took away all the parking. So we're down. So we did that parking study, hoping that we don't need the parking. It was just trying to comply with the, you know, city ordinance in the first place. But we have 3 employees. We don't have any customers that come to our office. We have customers that come and drop off their work, and they'll pull inside of the building, unload it. When they come back to get it, they'll pull in the other bay on the other side and pick it up. So, in fact, my office isn't even open. I do all my work from home. So it's not much going on as far as traffic, just in and out. And I have a comment also. You know, I have looked for property. I've been looking for a year because they raised my rent by $8,000 a month. And man, who cares? If they want to buy a building that don't have enough parking, they can't buy it. I've looked at buildings that don't have enough power. I've looked at buildings that don't have anything that I need. I move on. And that's the way this will be. Either they'll have a business that will work in there or they won't. That'll be, you know, pretty straightforward, I think.
Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
No.
I did a quick search. Just looks like your previous address or your current address is in Springville.
Springville, yeah.
1879 North, 1300 West.
Yeah, you'll see 2 trucks parked there every day.
Okay. And then we're just jumping ahead to questions from unless you haven't noticed. What side is the entrance? Not the entrance to the building, but you said there's a bay that cars will pull in and drop their
there's
materials
two
on.
bays, one on each
Where-
side of the building.
Which, if you could point to me where that is it
okay.
on Valley Vista? I had a hard time seeing it. Okay, wait.
Yeah, well, you can see on the right side, the office pokes out in the middle. The fire bay on the right and on the left. They drop off in the right bay, and on the left bay, they go in and pick up. Those will be 30-foot wide bays. And so there'll be walls, and then all the work will be done in the middle. So they'll go in the right side, drop off the work, then we'll process it through the middle of the shop. When it's finished, we'll put it in the left bay for them to pick up. All of our operations that we've had, all this work's been kept outside. It gets dirty, or else you got to go dig it out of the snow or whatever. So building this new building, I try to set it up so it would run perfectly. So I've addressed all those issues that way.
Go ahead.
So are they backing in from the street in those driveways to get into those bays?
The whole idea is to drive through and go out the back. You drive through in the right one to go unload, and then you go out the back, drive through the left one, unload, and go out that back entrance.
So is the width of this, I'm looking at it on the north side, it looks very narrow.
On the north?
I'm assuming they're going around the building to come out on the other side?
Well, you go through the building. That driveway won't be used much, only to go empty the trash dumps.
Oh, so you're saying they're driving into the bay, driving through the building and driving out. So these big trucks don't need to go around this little narrow road.
Wholly enclosed operation.
Okay, that's why I was concerned. I was like, how are they going to make those turns with cars parked on the side? Okay, beautiful.
We've had a hard time getting the distance in the back to pull out. And
Gotcha.
So there's been a lot of,
Gotcha.
I mean, it's almost like that's the only place it could fit. It's right there.
Okay, I understand that better. I have one more question for you. They talked about dust collection bins. Is there at what point in the process are the dust collection fans, whatever, regulated? Who regulates those? Make sure they're working so there's not particulate matter going in.
Well,
to the air?
First of all, it's all enclosed, so there's no dust collectors outside. It's all inside. So yeah, we'll empty them, according to what
it's just your internal HVAC. Okay.
Yeah, the dust just goes into a big barrel, and when it gets close to full, we empty it. That's it.
Okay.
Do you do sandblasting at this operation?
Yep.
And is that the same story with your dust collection?
Oh yeah, that's where the main dust collection will be. The powder rooms, they have their own little dust collection. Each one of them just sucks the powder into filters, and then you clean those out once a week. The air returns back into the shop. So there's no air going outside at all.
And this is maybe partly just curiosity. So I've been a part of a steel company for a number of years, and we use a tremendous amount of yard space. I'm a little surprised at the size of this. So how does your operation differ in not having the yard space to be able to?
Because we moved it inside.
So all of your storage and your processing is inside.
A lot of outside storage is nice, but they don't want to see that in here for one thing, and I don't like it either. It's junky, so everything will be inside.
I want to let you know, if you pull up a Google Map aerial on their current Springville address, it tells a different tale.
Yeah, it's junky.
With him moving it inside, it's quite a big contrast.
Well, this is the first building I've been able to design from scratch. I've always moved into buildings that I've had to make them work somehow. And so, this will operate real efficiently. And we don't want to deal with product outside anyway with the weather and everything. So.
Anyone else? Any other commissioners have questions? Okay. Stand by. Just take a seat nearby in case we need to recall you. Any district representatives present? No? Okay. We'll now open this up for public comment. Yeah, we'll open the hearing to public comments. If there are any neighborhood district chairs present, they'll have 3 minutes to comment. The general public will have 2 minutes to comment. Our staff member will put a timer up. When your time is up, you'll hear a ding and the microphone will be muted. Each person may make one comment. If we have additional questions, we'll invite you to come forward at that time. Go ahead. If there's anyone from the public, please come up, line up, make your comments heard. Okay, seeing no public comment, we will now close public comment. Commissioners, discuss.
I spend some time around this area, and I mean, there's not a lot happening. So I think it's great to have someone wanting to invest in this area, and like Mr. Murray was saying, add value. And I have almost zero concerns about the parking. I mean, even if there was an issue, every once in a while, there's street parking for days.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the old aerial photos and I don't even know where they parked on there, but it looks like it wasn't parking intensive at their Springville location. And yeah, I think if this were to be sold or transferred, then, you know, the new owner in applying for a business license would have the constraints of it. They'd go in knowing, or they should if they do their due diligence. Anyone else?
I think it's an exciting opportunity to see a business go into an otherwise unwanted place, and to see that it's going to be a better situation for them, which will be good for everybody, I think.
Let's have a motion. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move that we approve the requested project plan application. Jake Black requests project plan approval for a new industrial warehouse in the PIC zone located at 2725 South Mountain Vista Parkway, Spring Creek neighborhood. That the required parking is 9 spaces and that all remaining CRC comments be addressed prior to a building permit being issued.
That's what I just wanted to make sure.
Right. I would have caught that too with the following 2 conditions. All right. Discussion on the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Knudsen with the second. Let's vote on it. Start roll call with Commissioner Knudsen.
Aye.
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 I vote aye.
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 Okay, it passes unanimously, 9-0. Thank you very much. Thanks for your participation. Look forward to having you in Provo. Item number 3, James Chapman requests project plan approval for a 195 unit townhome development in the MDR zone located at 5544 North River Run Drive, River Bottoms neighborhood. Staff member Aaron Ardmore is presenting.
Okay, thank you, Plan Commission. So actually the first thing before I jump into the proposed project is, as you know, we usually send you public comments that come in through email ahead of the hearing. We had one that came in about 90 minutes before the hearing. So we didn't have time to send it to you. So if you'll allow me, I'll just read it for the record.
Yes, please.
Okay, so this comes from Sharon Mehmet. She's a Provo resident. I apologize for the late email. Okay, I know we were late in the process here, and I understand correctly, this will not need to go to City Council next for approval. I have been watching some of the meetings on this project and don't feel like the neighborhood and city concerns about allowing access to the Provo River have really been met by the rendering that I see. I know my neighbors who would like to jog or bike near the river would not consider the road through the project as allowing that access. In fact, one would have to be in someone's backyard to actually be considered to be accessing the river. There are a few places left in Provo, these new residents are where we have the opportunity to preserve that access. I don't propose taking it away completely from the applicant and these new residents, but could some part of it be actually accessed still, please? Along those lines, I am glad to see from the renderings at the end of 5600 North is left slightly open, possibly for future improvement of access to University Avenue and the current Parkway Trail via an improved bridge over 5600 North. I'm actually a little surprised that for such a large project that emergency services wouldn't require the easy second access that 5600 North would allow. Could that be written into the proposed contract with the city so it stays once development actually begins? Thanks for your consideration. So I think I'll be able to address those concerns as I move forward in this presentation. To make you familiar or refamiliarize the Plan Commission with this project, this came to you before as a concept plan and a zone change and a general plan change. So you've seen this a few times. Now we're back here for the project plan. The project plan would have to meet both the medium density residential zone that's on the property now and the development agreement that's tied to the land that came with the rezone. So what is proposed is 195 townhomes, and the development agreement held it as a cap of 198. So they've met that. There is one correction you could see up on the screen, 15.24 acres. So that was a correction from the staff report that you received. I believe I had 14.45. I had left out the little triangle on the east side there where you could see the pool and clubhouse area. That was a separate parcel, and I mistakenly left that out of my calculations. So that's an update from the staff report. I might as well add that we have two other updates from the staff report. The applicant kind of let me know I had some old information or incorrect wording, and he was correct in showing me that. So on page 2, the second paragraph of the overview talks about the plan showing a new public street. It's actually a private street with public access, and I think that's an important difference. And then in the parking, I had the old parking numbers. So findings of fact 6 and 7, the required parking for the project is actually 526 stalls based on the unit count and unit types, and they're providing 538 stalls. So hopefully that clears up anything that you see different in this presentation. So here's a zoom in of the proposed project. Again, staff has found this to meet code, but I want to just highlight some things specifically based on the public comments that we got and some of the history here. The access to the river, you can see along the north side or along the east side, the top of the map here, that gray trail, that gray asphalt trail. That to me should satisfy the concern of the email that I just read. The applicant has also wisely left open space in case that 5600 North across the pedestrian bridge ever does become a public street with a right of way. You didn't put any buildings there to make that an option in the future if it becomes feasible. So I think those things have been thought of. The emergency services are happy with the 2 points of egress on the north and the south of the project. It goes down through the Riverwoods on the south and then up into Orem, 800 North on the north side. Let's see. So there's a breakdown. If you're interested in the unit types, there's their bedroom counts, parking counts, and so forth. We can hit that if any of you have a question. And of course, the elevations here. So these went through design review committee. There's a couple color schemes for both these designs that they've offered, and then you have the clubhouse there on the bottom left of the screen. The design review committee approved those. They didn't have any required changes or anything like that. So staff is at this point where we have the project plan in front of us. We find that it meets code, it meets the development agreement. There are a couple conditions that I would ask for in the granting approval to this. Is one, that there are a couple remaining staff CRC comments to be worked out with Public Works, but nothing that should hold up the approval. There are minor things that can be worked out, and that the final plat is recorded on this property to create the one lot where it's 2 different lots currently. And we'd ask for that to happen before building permits are obtained. But that's all I have on this one.
I have a question. With that future access on the bridge across, looks like it would cut into the tennis court or whatever courts they have.
So right. So
how do you feel about that happening?
Obviously that would have to go, and they could probably make that up somewhere else on the site, or that's a adjustment that we'd have to go through if the city needed that street network, if we thought that was more important than that percentage of open space. That's discussion for the future. But I think the main point was that they didn't put any buildings in the way, so nobody's losing their house.
Go ahead. Anyone else have questions for him?
I might have missed this, but what were the qualifications for that becoming a road? That's just there in case, or is there a certain...
In case someday, right? So someday UDOT will likely put a light on 5600 North and University Avenue.
And you'd want it to go all the way
and
through.
That would make sense to carry that through.
I'm having a hard time seeing on the map where this is in relation to what's already there. And I'm just wondering, how far down do they have to go before they reach University Avenue access or 4800 North? Like,
so 5200 is a lighted intersection just south of
in
what you
between
can see
those
on the
office
map.
buildings?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's not shown here. That's just below on the right-hand corner?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So they're going to have to drive all the way through the office park to get out to 4800, or just down to those office buildings to get out on 52?
Yeah, to 5200.
And 5200 is the one that goes across and then goes down to 4800 as well, right? It connects, there's an L?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Like in front of the medical building.
Yeah,
and
it keeps
turns
going
down
west
there.
and then south down to
Okay.
4800.
How easy is the access from the Orem side? Does it go straight out to
800 North?
Yeah.
Yes, most likely would be a right out only
because it's so close to the interchange there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask, so attachment 3 elevations, those have been approved? Is that correct? That's the color scheme and everything that's been approved?
Yeah, the design review committee approved those.
What's page 21?
Page 21.
Page 21, we have white and is that the original? So that's not the approved or anything that's being discussed, correct?
I'm sorry, I don't have a page 21 on my, oh, I see what you're saying on the staff report. Yes, those are.
That's old.
Those are past renderings that came with the
Okay.
concept plan.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have two questions. One is, you said this was just, the road was just in case. I'm wondering what level of road that would be, like collector or whatever. There's no inkling of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing on that tonight.
The other question I had was, what specifically were the concerns from the neighborhood meeting about, could you elaborate if you know about rooftops versus green space and possible occupancies? What were those concerns?
Sure. So there was a couple voices in the neighborhood meeting I attended, that district meeting, where it looked to them, to a couple of those voices, that there's more asphalt and rooftop than green space. However, they're meeting and exceeding the requirement for the zone.
When I looked at this earlier today at the map, it didn't seem like there were neighbors very close. Were these neighbors on, like, there's so much commercial surroundings and then like empty areas. Is there any indication of like where those people were from? Like, were they on the other side across
So
the
District
river?
1 is pretty much all of North Provo. So it's all those different neighborhoods: Edgemont, River Bottoms, Sherwood Hills. They're pretty spread out.
Okay, so we don't know exactly where these people were coming from as far as where they live, if it's affected.
Right.
Is there anything in this, is there anything that indicates if these will be for rent or for sale?
They will all be for rent. So the property owner will keep all these, and they'll just be for rent townhomes.
Okay, thank you.
One more question I had. maybe this isn't part of the process at all, but the potential road kind of cuts off the clubhouse and a bunch of just a little portion of this. I don't know. That seems really weird to me that there would be like this little piece that is separate potentially.
So this is the
Right.
road that has the public access through it.
So it's like right in front of the clubhouse.
Right.
Right. Yeah. I just think that's like a little bit weird that this little piece could potentially be, made into a little island from higher speed traffic coming off the highway. I just think I don't know. Maybe there's no apparatus to look at that, but I think that that's something that's concerning, that you would cut this little community kind of in pieces.
I think she's talking about if 5600 comes
5600.
through.
Oh,
Yes,
okay. Yeah.
the potential street.
Yeah. I mean, that's the unknown that we're not prepared to discuss tonight. So.
My question is related to that. I mean, yeah, they've left the space, etc., but is that just going to be a huge fight in the future?
I don't know. I obviously can't tell you.
We don't have experience
I don't have an
in
answer
the
for
city to say, yes, it's terrible, or
No. We're just reviewing the project plan tonight.
The fact that there's no building is going to make it easier.
perhaps, but if it's cutting off a corner in the clubhouse, and I can still see it being everybody's like, you're cutting off my clubhouse. I don't want to do that.
I mean, the people who would be most upset theoretically would be the residents, right? They move in there, they're renting, granted they're not owning it, but they're going to be concerned that, hey, I just lost my courts. I'm wondering if there's something in the development agreement could be modified to indicate that there's just a notice that it's everyone's aware that that's subject to future development by UDOT. Or that we require that they disclose that to their renters.
So it wouldn't be UDOT, it'd be a city.
Or city that but that the owner, the Canyon River Holdco, has to disclose to their renters that, hey, this might disappear in the future.
So we've already recorded the development agreement with the rezone. The project plan just needs to meet the statutes of that MVR zone.
Okay, so it's a little bit out of the side of the scope of what we're
Right.
discussing.
Exactly. Thank you.
Dang it. Do the right thing.
I think this is one of those things that the market will, like we were talking about in our work meeting, that the market's going to dictate this. Somebody's not going to want to live there if it's an island, and they'll have to figure out what to do with it at that point. But
Or they might want it more because it has closer access to University Avenue. I don't know.
so that's not, I don't know, that doesn't bug me as much. More, how do we feel about this many units? How do we feel about the percent? I mean, they've met the percentages. They're not asking for exceptions. So I don't think we have any grounds to say we don't like this. If they are meeting the development agreement, they're meeting the review committee, CRC. You said the percentage of amenities that they're providing is it just barely at 10%? Or I want to say it was a little bit more.
Yeah, it's a little bit more. Yes. Required was 34,493. They're providing 43,177.
Is this the same project that we reviewed that asked for the rezoning? Or is this something different?
Yeah. So they were here within the last year to ask for the rezone.
Okay.
Yep.
So maybe we just need to hear from the developer now and get some more information.
Yeah, we did back in 2022. We did approve the concept plan,
Right.
the rezone, then the general plan amendment for this.
Yep. That's correct.
So yeah, unless anyone has any more questions for Staff Member Ardmore, we'll go ahead with the applicant. Thanks. Mr. Chapman?
How you doing, Jason
Just to
White?
know, 15 minutes for your presentation. Time up.
I won't take
Bye.
nearly that much.
Okay.
Jason White, 50s Capital. Jamie's our development partner. I just wanted to assuage some of your concerns. I know it sounds like, the horse out of the barn a little bit, and you feel like you wish you would have done other things. But I think just to clarify a couple of things. One, the future road was an easement that Provo City had asked for that we are, happy to grant, because at some point, if there's a traffic problem, it would impact us as well. And, this would be coming off of 5600. And so, this shouldn't be high-speed traffic because it's not a big road. We hope, right? If it's high-speed traffic, we can put some traffic measures in, like speed bumps or something like that, to like make it not be a thoroughfare. But we office 2 buildings down, so we are also equally concerned with people ripping through there. And I think it's the same issue we would run into at the townhomes. Is we want this to be a quiet, kind of family-oriented community, and anything that is to the detriment of that would be of concern to us, right? As well as being, officing 2 buildings down. So that's number one. Number two, given it's an easement, we for a period of time, as long as we don't have any buildings there, it's much easier. We can put a pickleball court or something and make it an amenity. And then if at such time it's deemed that we need some more traffic access and this road gets built, then the pickleball court goes away. But with renters, they see what they rent, and somebody that moves in after the pickleball court's gone isn't going to remember there was a pickleball court there when before they lived there. So, and same thing goes with the road. Anybody that lives there, it's going to be probably at least a 12 to 24 month process to get the road going. And so anybody that lives there that feels like the road might be either negative or positively impacting them, they're going to know that well in advance to where they could make a decision where they live based on that future date, which may never come, or it may come sooner rather than later. So anyway, I just want to answer any of your questions that you may have had, and if there's technical questions, I can turn it over to Jamie with our development team.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you. Any questions for our applicant? Okay, I'm not seeing any.
Oh man, already. All right.
Okay. Go ahead and have us, unless Jeff, did you have any? Okay. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Did anyone want to speak to his expert, any technical questions? You mentioned he had another person here. No? Okay. Yeah, this is in District 1. Is there a District 1 representative present? Okay. With that, we'll go ahead and open this up, open the hearing to public comment. Once again, if you'll have 2 minutes to comment, and please line up. Go ahead and come forward. If anyone else wants to come forward, please come up. If I don't see you sitting down lined up, we're going to move on and close public comment. Go ahead and state your name and residence.
Ronald Woolley, 2890 Rolling Mills Drive, Provo. I also have a commercial building that is adjacent to this property on the south side. At the city council meeting where the zoning change was changed from commercial to the current zone, the developer promised the city council that there would be a Provo River Trail running along the west side of the property. I see that on the plan. In the gray box to the top, that's actually an Orem, so it's a separate approval for that property. What I would like to know is the developer putting on all of his plans such that it happens, the promise that the Provo River Trail will go from south of this property all the way to 800 North to connect up with the Jordan River Parkway and with the trail to Bridal Veil. And since I can't see the gray part, I don't know what their intentions are. So I was wondering if the promise holds that they made to the city council that they would do that. The other question I have is back then they were talking about rental properties, and these are townhomes. Has this changed? Are these now homes to be sold to be owner residents, or are they rentals? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woolley. If I can invite the applicant back up just to address those two comments. One regarding the extension of the river trail towards 8th North, and then just clarify the rental ownership thing. I think I already heard you say they're all going to be rentals.
Yeah, these are all rentals. They've been rentals the whole time. And to Ron's question, you know, the river trail is intended to go from where it currently exists in the business park all the way through. We're working with Provo and Orem jointly to have the river trail continue on all the way up to 8th North. It doesn't connect past 8th North because there's no kind of egress across the river, but it will end up being kind of like a roundabout and then come back down. And if you want to connect to the Provo River Trail, then it goes across. There's a bridge up on the north end that will connect through, and then there's the footbridge, which you see, which may be a future road that you can also ride across and connect into the Provo River Trail and continue up north through the canyon. So it connects all the river trails. So,
thank you. And just to acknowledge, I see a head nod by Mr. Woolley, feeling that I'm taking that to mean your concerns were addressed. Is that? Yes, he says yes. Appreciate it. Any other public comment?
I'm Kurt Beecher with Central Utah Water. If you went back to the other map where the aerial was, our property is up on the left-hand corner there where the old Exactware building was. So that's where our offices are. We have a couple of large facilities that go through this property, and we are working with them, and they've been good to work with. And so I just wanted to let you know that we don't have any issues with that. There's the Alpine Aqueduct 2B pipeline that goes through there, and then there's also the power line that comes from our Olmsted power plant that goes through this property. Both of those have to be, some work has to be done with both of those. Some of it's just easements and some of it's actually moving the power line. So, but we're working with them and don't have any issues. Just wanted to let you know.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. Discuss among commissioners. Anyone? If I don't see any comment, I'm going to go ahead and make your statement. But if anyone else wants to move ahead with the motion, I'm also ready to entertain that. Go ahead.
I like the look of the elevations. I think it will look nice. I like that there's variety in them. I feel like they've met the requirements of the zone. And I know it feels like we should talk longer because there's more units, but I feel like we talked a lot about it when the zone change was considered. And there's been a lot of oversight, and there will continue to be a lot of oversight as the permit process continues. So I don't have a problem with this. I think I think they'll do a nice job, and hopefully it will be a nice addition to the city. So I don't feel like we have any reason to deny it because we're really in the position of saying the code says this, they've met the requirements in the code. So unless we see any red flags to discuss, I don't see any myself.
Yeah, I'll just second. We did spend a fair amount of time on this when it first came up on those first three items. But if any commissioners want to bring up some other things, I'm happy to entertain them. Commissioner Whitlock.
Yeah, this looks like a fantastic development. I do remember when we talked about this, it was like that river trail access was a key requirement, and it sounded like that was also recapitulated with the city council. That would be my only concern, is the current plan shows it kind of ending, and then there's just Orem, and so I would feel a lot better if I saw that gray line go through so that connection happens, because that feels like in the spirit of the original agreement we made. But other than that, I think it's going to be a great development.
Let's hear a motion from someone. Commissioner Sal.
So I'll make a motion, move that the planning commission approve the proposed project plan. This is item 3, project plan approval for 195 unit townhome development in the MDR zone located at 5544 North River Run Drive, River Bottoms neighborhood. with the following conditions: that the remaining CRC comments be addressed and that a final plat is recorded prior to permits.
Any further discussion on the motion? Or amendments? No? Okay, is there a second for the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, let's vote on that. Let's start with Commissioner Knudsen.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
I vote aye.
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 All right, passes unanimously. 9-0. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chapman. I'm going to be reading the next item, numbers 4. Read them all 3 at the same time. Just take them one at a time, or this one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. Okay, item number 4. David Peterson requests an ordinance text amendment to the interim transit-oriented development zone building height section 14.23.090 of the Provo City Code to remove the building step back requirement at the 5th floor. City-wide application. Staff member Dustin Wright presenting. Go ahead.
Thank you. So this item, the applicant's requesting this text amendment here to facilitate a more efficient development on their property that's in the ITOD zone. So as you can see here, this text amendment is striking out a sentence in the building height section of the ITOD zone. The amendment essentially is looking at removing the step back requirement. So it's a 15-foot step back when you get to the 5th floor of a development, that the building would at that point shift back 15 feet from where the first 5 levels of the building are. This is something similar to what we removed from our downtown zone about a decade ago, where we removed the step back requirement except for along Center Street. That zone, we haven't seen any issues with that. The reason that was kept in Center Street was just because of the historic district that's in our downtown. But in the ITOD zone, we don't have an issue removing the step back requirement. We feel like it will help remove a hurdle that exists for development and help maximize the building potential in these areas that we've designated as a city for these higher density developments is what's being proposed tonight. So in our city right of ways in this area, we have like 80+ feet of space. And so when we look at the building heights permitted in the zone, ITOD zone has a 100-foot building height. So we don't see an issue here with removing that step back requirement. For this area here in purple, that's our ITOD zone, where this text amendment would affect this area here in the city. So staff's recommending that you forward a positive recommendation onto the city council for this ordinance text amendment. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Go ahead, commission members. Any questions for Mr. Wright? Go ahead.
I just have one. In the staff report, it talks about how there haven't been issues with daylighting. That was one of the reasons for it. The question I had was into the current ITOD zone, if those were ever moved into that zone. I mean, I would imagine it doesn't go much further, but would there be any concern with width of streets and sunlight or daylight sunlight down to those?